Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, thank you all so much for being here this morning. Before I begin to speak, I would like to beg the blessings and the permission of the senior Vaishnavas here, Srila Jumna Swami Badahari Prabhu. Kalakanta Prabhu as well. Thank you so much. I would also like their blessings. Thank you. So I thought I'd start with a story today about a man that I knew. And this is going to fit into everything that we've been talking about, because in one sense, we're coming down to it's kind of the most fundamental question that the spiritual seekers have, especially when they come to Vedanta, when they come to yoga, when it gets to the absolute truth. That truth, that is, when we say it's absolute, it means it's not dependent on anything else, right? Like if I picked anyone here and said, who are you and where are you from? We would find that our existence is dependent on someone prior to us. Oh, well, I'm the son or the daughter of this person. And where did they come from? Well, they're the son or the daughter of this person. And you'd keep going back. They would always be in relation. Their existence is in relation to something prior. And that means it's relative. It's not absolute. But what is that absolute truth? That becomes the big question in Vedanta. What does it all go back to? And when you get back to the absolute truth, Janmadyasya yataha, that from which everything emanates, is that absolute truth a person? Or is that absolute truth an energy? This is a big question. And we were reading yesterday how Vyas, the person that compiled all the Vedic literature, the person, not yesterday, I'm sorry, but the day before yesterday, last time we got together, the Vyas himself, the person that compiled that, he wanted to be very clear about this. He wanted nobody to be mistaken, because he had written about both. And so he sets up a scene, he relates a scene, he shares with us a scene of all these sages who had different ideas and different opinions, and they were seeking the answer themselves. And the sage Sutta says the whole purpose of human life, it should never be wasted. It should never be squandered. The opportunity of human life is so special and unique that it should never be squandered over just trying to satisfy the senses of the body, which all the animals, they're all doing that. We have a higher potential. And that higher potential is is tattva jigyasu, inquiring into the absolute truth. And then the sages, they would naturally question at that point, well, what is the absolute truth? We've been wondering this all along. Can you answer that question for us, please? And then he speaks this verse, which is such a key verse. It's so important. Vedanti tattva vidas tattvam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaneti shabdite. That this one non-dual advayam, it's one non-dual absolute truth manifests in three ways. So all three are the manifestations of the one. And what are the three? There's the divine energy, Brahman. There's Paramatma, God within the heart of every living being, within every atom, this divine intelligence behind everything. And then there's Bhagavan, the person. Right? And a chapter later, he's going to describe that Bhagavan is that from everything emanates from that. Svayam Bhagavan is the source of all the devas, all the incarnations. Everything is stemming from this one source, this divine person. So that becomes such an important question. And there Vyas very intentionally shares this with us so that we can understand. But I wanted to share a story about a person, because we're talking about realizing Brahman, realizing Paramatma, realizing Bhagavan. What does it look like? And when we look at Bhakti, it may seem to be a sentimental affair. It may seem to be very much, it appears to be very worldly, because we commonly consider spirituality to be beyond the things of this world. And when we look at this world, we see forms and we see relationships. Shouldn't spirituality be free of form and free of relationships? Isn't it only then that there's no attachment and there's no pain? And so how would meditating deeply on love affairs, affairs of love, love play, lila, how is it that would deliver one from pain when it's focused on form and relationship? And so I want to share a story of one bhakti yogi that I knew. And some of us here knew him. He was the godbrother of our senior devotees here, and his name was Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He's a very fascinating man. I knew him I was a young monk, and he was like a senior monk to me. So he was a person that I would learn from, and I would see as an example, as when I was a young man. He passed away maybe about 15 years or so ago. And he was a dynamic person. He was African-American, grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, kind of a rough upbringing, but he was like a studious, boy, and he managed to get a full scholarship to Princeton University, which is one of the prestigious universities in America. And when he was there, he studied diligently, but he also there discovered like the civil rights movement, and he became a Black Panther. You all know what a Black Panther is? Black Panther was like these militant civil rights activists in the 60s and maybe early 70s. And so he was, exploring the world, and then he started to get deeper into spirituality. And he got into Vedanta, and then he got into Bhakti. And he became a monk, as a young man just coming out of college. And he was very, very devoted, very dedicated, practiced Bhakti very seriously. And as the years passed, he became deeper and deeper and deeper in it, became very wise. And he served. He served with so much courage. Actually, one of his sevas, one of his services, was that he used to smuggle Bhagavad Gitas into behind the Iron Curtain, into the communist countries back in the 70s, which was like a dangerous, a very dangerous thing to do. But his compassion drove him to do it. These people, they have no access to this knowledge. This knowledge has changed my life. I need to share it with them. So he would smuggle these books in. It's the kind of thing that could, you could wind up in a labor camp and just lost there, if you got caught. And beyond that, he was like a dark-skinned African-American. He was like in countries where there were none. So it's not like he could just kind of like just be inconspicuous, so it was very daring. But in any case, as the years passed and he got deeper and deeper and his realizations became deeper and deeper, he he became like a spiritual guide, a spiritual teacher, a guru. And many people became his students and his disciples. Among them, famous people like Nelson Mandela himself. He used to do huge programs in stadiums with Nelson Mandela. There's programs where they're doing a lot of what we're doing here in this festival, massive kirtan, massive distribution of food, of prasadam. So there's Nelson Mandela, who he's like an advisor to, a spiritual kind of counselor to. Muhammad Ali, and many other, thousands of people actually, literally. So he was a beautiful man. He was like handsome, and he was like almost like athletic. Like he had a body like an athlete, like maybe maybe most of you don't know American football, but maybe like a football player in Europe or South America. And he just had an effulgent personality, very dynamic, an exciting person, a very magnetic personality. So he was a joy to be around. And then one day he got this diagnosis that he had cancer. He had cancer in his foot, and it was in a very aggressive form of cancer. And the doctor said it was kind of like one of those, you go to the doctor and then you just get this message like, you don't have long to live. It was like that, like right now you need to do so. They said, this is a very aggressive form of cancer, and we advise that you amputate your foot immediately, like that, which is of course a shocking thing to have to hear. Nobody wants to hear that kind of news. But he was so deeply spiritually situated that he took it all in stride. He said, my body, I've offered it to God. I use it in God's service. If in order to continue that we need to take the foot, then okay, amputate the foot. So his foot was amputated. But very shortly after that, they had seen that the cancer had spread up his leg. So they said, you must amputate the leg. So he said, okay, if you must amputate the leg, then amputate the leg. They amputated the leg. And then they said, actually, we see that it's spread throughout your entire body. This is a super aggressive, form of cancer. At best, we could try to prolong your life a little bit, by giving you all kind of heavy treatments, but you don't have a long time to live no matter what. And he said, that's okay. I've tried to live my life as an example of how to live in the service of God as a bhakti yogi. Now I'll try to show the example of how to die in the service of God as a bhakti yogi. And he went to one farm that was like a bhakti yoga temple and farm. And he said, I'm going to stay here. And anybody that wants to be with me is welcome to come and spend my last days with me. And I'm going to spend my time engaged in the practices of bhakti yoga, specifically kirtan, chanting of God's names, both in kirtan or on his beads as a personal meditation. And hearing Krishna's leelas, hearing Krishna's pastimes as they're written about in Srimad Bhagavatam. These are the fundamental practices of bhakti. And he said, I'll just continue these practices. These have been the practices of my life. And now I'll practice them right to the end of my life. And so he did that. Now I saw him near the final days, and it was painful for me to see, because here was a man that I saw as always so dynamic and vibrant and healthy, and his body was shriveling up. He was becoming emaciated gradually, and he had no leg. But he was just as effulgent as ever, even in that body that you could see it deteriorating. He was happy and was sharing with just as even deeper realizations. You could see he was moving forward. He wasn't moving backwards. And towards the very end, another mentor of mine, some of you may have heard of Radhanath Swami, he visited him. They were close friends. And when they saw each other, Bhakti Tirtha Swami said to Radhanath Swami, can I ask a favor of you? And he said, of course, anything you ask. I will give you whatever I can. He said, my request is that you stay with me here until I die. He says, I want to die in your arms, right? He wants to be thinking of Krishna, and he knows that the best and easiest way to be thinking of Krishna is to have Krishna's devotees around you. And he saw Radhanath Swami as especially dear to Krishna, and he said, you stay here with me, please. And Radhanath Swami said, of course I'll stay with you. And at that point it was predicted he had only 3 days left to live. But he ended up living 8 more weeks. And Radha Swami stayed with him that entire week, that entire period. And they had very deep, they shared very deeply, the two of them, in those last days. But Radha Swami shared with me something that I want to share with you today. I think is really significant. And that is, I believe it was the second to last day, the day before he passed away. At this point, he's very emaciated, very thin. He's not taking all the painkillers that people commonly take because he wants his consciousness to be very lucid. And so you could say he was in a very painful condition. You know, his body was racked with pain, it was emaciated, he had lost his leg, and he was hours away from death. And the two of them they had their beads, and they were chanting together, Hare Krishna mantra together, meditating, going deep into it. And Radha Swami said that at one point, Bhakti Tirtha Swami turned around and looked at him. And he said he had never seen a face like this before. He said the smile on his face it just wasn't an ordinary smile. It was something beyond. It was something incredibly brilliant in that smile, effulgent in that smile. And he said he was crying. But he said he wasn't crying like people normally cry, where some tears come out and they roll down your face. He said water was gushing and squirting out of his eyes, which is something that we read about in these ancient texts as a symptom of one experiencing a deep spiritual ecstasy. So he has this huge smile and water's pouring out of his eyes. And he says like this, he says, Radha Swami, life just doesn't get any better than this. Right? Life just doesn't get any better than this. You have no leg. Your body's racked with cancer. You're about to die. Anything that you know of and that's dear to the force of nature is about to strip it from you, and there's nothing you can do to resist it. When most people would be saying, life just doesn't get any worse than this. What could be worse? He was saying, life just doesn't get any better than this. He had transcended the modes of material nature. He was beyond it all. Alexia, welcome. Good to have you here. This is a state of Brahman realization, right? I wanted to read to you, I'll read to you a couple things. There's a chapter in the Bhagavad Gita that's dedicated to the gunas, the modes of material nature, which we discussed many classes ago. How this entire material realm is composed of three energies. And those energies are just like when you look at the screen of like a video screen, and it's made up of three different colors. Like they say red, blue, and green. Those three colors blend to create all the different colors in the spectrum. And so the yogis say, in a similar way, this entire material realm and all of its varieties of forms and so on, it's all composed of the combination of three energies. And these three energies each emanate different influences that we take in through our senses, and these shape our minds and our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts. And that's what yoga is meant to free us from, that influence. Right? And so if you read the Yoga Sutras, which go on and on with so many different verses about deeply understanding the mind and how to become free, this is the last of the Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras 434. Ultimate liberation is when the gunas, these three modes of material nature, devoid of any purpose for the Purusha, for the person, they return to their original latent state. In other words, when the power of consciousness is situated in its own essential nature. Right? This is the goal of Patanjali's yoga, that you've achieved a yogic state where the modes of material nature no longer have any influence on you, and you're free. Right? Here the word used is kaivalya. It means your awareness is not affected by anything external. Right? And in the Bhagavad Gita, the three modes, there's an entire chapter dedicated to these three modes of material nature, the 14th chapter. And when we get towards the end of that 14th chapter, Arjuna, having heard the description of the modes of material, he asks Krishna a couple questions. I would like to read those questions to you. Are you ready for those questions? Yes. Okay. Arjuna says, my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who has transcended these three modes? What is his behavior? And how does this person transcend the modes? How do you do it, right? What do they behave like? And how do you get there? All right? And then Krishna answers that question in the next few verses. He says like this: he who does not have an attraction or an aversion for these different three modes and their effects, who doesn't long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed amongst all these reactions of the material qualities. Whatever's happening external, my mind is peaceful. Remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of material nature. Okay, this is something that Krishna has been speaking about throughout Bhagavad Gita. He calls it samatvam, even-mindedness. And he says, samatvam yoga uchate. Yoga is when someone has an even mind like this. He was saying so many different things, right? Someone gives you a stone or a piece of gold. You know, if someone came up and gave you a bar of gold, like a really big, heavy one, I don't know how much it would be worth, but let's say it's worth millions, millions of dollars. If you go find these yogis way up in these hills who have achieved this state, and you say, here, this is for you, this big block of gold, they're going to take that and they're going to say, well, what do I do with it? This is worth millions of dollars. Well, what am I going to do? Like, walk all the way back down and go to Delhi and find someone to hand this thing, and they're going to give me money, and then what am I going to do with the money? I don't need any of that. I walked away from all that. You give me a stone, you give me a piece of gold. I see them equally. You understand? They're free. I like that. Most people you give that to, immediately the mind starts to race. This changes everything, right? If I gave you $1 billion, oh my God, my whole life is different now. I get excited, my heart's pumping, I'm calling everybody that I know, everything's different now. They're like, no, that's exactly the same, right? Doesn't make any difference to them. Whether I'm being praised, whether someone's saying not nice things about me, that can really get us. That can really send the mind for loops. Equal, right? He's saying this is what a person looks like who's transcended those modes. You need to take my foot? Okay. You need to take my leg? That's all right. I'm going to die? That's okay. Right? This is Brahma Bhuta. Question, Prabhu? Yes.
So it's wonderful explaining how a person is not affected by those. But then on the other contrary, we can see many spiritualists, they're trying to, be on that level, even though they're distressed. So, they're pushing it down. I've seen many yogis, how do you transcend that?
You're asking exactly what Arjuna asked. That's perfect. How do you do it? Arjuna said, how does one transcend those modes? Okay, that's the next verse. The answer is here. You look like you're doubting the answer already. but it's here, I guarantee you. It's a very good answer. The answer is, Mam chayo vyabhicharyena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in, the term here is bhakti yogena sevate. One who serves in the yoga of bhakti, in the yoga of devotion, unfailing in all circumstances, right? They're fixed in it. It's not something that they do every now and then as a practice, and they just do it on Sunday. No, it's become their full life, their full heart, their full consciousness, fully devoted to serving with love like this. Sagunan samatityatan. Samatita means you pass over it. Sagunan, the modes of material nature, you pass over them. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. and thus they come to the level of Brahman. So it's saying you can achieve that through dedicating your full body, your full words, your full mind in bhakti, in devotional service, right? If you focus like that, if you give yourself like that. That's why I use this example of Bhakti Tirtha Swami. Here was a person that did that. He just made that decision. This is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to give my body, I'm going to give my mind, I'm going to give my words, I'm going to give my all in love, in service to God. And it's not that he didn't get Brahman realization. Brahman realization comes through that. And this is the point. This point is so essential. That if you have devotion for God, if you have love for God within your heart, you lose all confusion, all bewilderment, all attraction to the temporary things of these worlds which cause pain. You have the Brahman realization is inside the Bhagavan realization. If you love God really, for real, we can be on the stage where we're practicing love of God and you may not have that Brahman realization yet. Okay? So you're practicing both. But if you have love of God, you have everything that Krishna was saying here in these verses. Stone, gold, I see it the same. Honor, dishonor, I see it the same, right? Because I've risen above it. He calls this Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, Brahman realization. This is what's achieved. Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, you achieve that through bhakti. You achieve that through giving your life to God. You achieve that through developing this love, finding this love, uncovering this love that's within you eternally. And through practices of devotion, that it arises in you, and then you feel it for real. That's Krishna's answer to your question. That's how you do it. It's not something that you just repress. No, you engage in a positive way. You take everything that you've got and you engage it in a positive way, rather than just trying to shut things down. You take everything you got and you engage it in service. You engage it in love. Yes.
When you feel distressed by something that is happening, how would you engage it properly? Not suppressing it, but engage it in devotion service.
Krishna is going to say in the second chapter, what is it? Matra sparshas tu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkha. Right? That this yogi, there's happiness and distress. You see that they come and go, like the winter and summer seasons. You tolerate them, right? This means you see, most of us, when happiness or distress comes, we think, I'm happy, I'm distressed. But the yogi is stepping back from the mind and saying, my mind is experiencing happiness. My mind is experiencing distress. I'm separate from them. I know they come and go. When I can remove myself from it like that, it makes it so much easier to tolerate it and remain peaceful. Right? Even if my emotions are going through these kinds of shifts, I can remove myself from it and watch my own emotions. And gradually I'll gain control of it. Step by step I gain control of it. Is that okay? It's so interesting that you asked that question, because I wanted to read something else. And this is a quote from, it speaks so much to what we were just talking about. This is a quote from a person he's a very, very popular speaker in spiritual circles. I would say right now he may be the most popular out there. I won't share his name. But I will say he has a large beard and a turban. And this, listen carefully to the statement. He was asked about love. This was an interview. And he said, we have given lots of significance to various psychological modes and moods that our intelligence takes, right? In other words, our mind takes on certain shapes, certain moods or certain modes. We call it fear, we call it courage, we call it love, we call it hate. But it is just different shades that your mind takes at different times. All of this is only a constant compulsive reaction to something around you. If somebody is nice to you, you fall in love with them. If somebody is nasty to you, you hate them. This is a psychological and social phenomenon. This is not an existential reality. Love is not an existential reality. Okay, I appreciate the statement on one level that he's giving a consistent Advaitic Vedantic presentation. He's not twisting the word love into something that it's not and saying like, you become love. He's saying love is just something that's going on in the mind. It's a reaction to an external phenomenon, and it has no existential reality, right? It's illusory. It's something that disappears like a dream. And when you finally get to truth, there's no more love there. There's just peace, right? There's just moksha. There's just release, like that. So he's presenting that. That's how he interprets love. And if you read the Upanishads, you could come to that conclusion. They're cryptic texts, and they're not emphasizing, they're not explicitly emphasizing divine love or the personal form of God, Bhagavan. It's more like there's information about love of God, there's information about Bhagavan, but it's more a little bit running underground. It's there. It's like a river that's running under the ground. It's there, but it's difficult to see. You have to dig a little bit and then you hit it. Question?
Yeah, if love is an illusion, then what about the love of God?
Okay, but yes, I'm with you right there. Is there such a thing as love? Let's accept that there's a thing that goes on in our minds that we call love that may be illusory or is commonly illusory. Or maybe, let's say in our world, most commonly it's illusory, right? It's something that comes and goes and it's in response to an external stimulus. It doesn't have an absolute existential reality. But is there a love that is a reflection of? Is there a true substance of love that's real, that's eternal, that's spiritual, and that is part of who we are, that's part of our nature, right? That exists in the spiritual realm, that exists beyond the shiftings of this world. And so it's exactly these kind of questions that Vyas wanted to clarify in his texts. You see, there'll be speakers that just speak, but they never go back to these original texts. This is something, if you want to find a source of real knowledge within Vedanta, then you look for someone who doesn't come forward and say, I'm enlightened and hear what I have to say. But you look for someone who's like, I'm just a representative of these ancient teachings. I'm just trying to take them as they are and express them and explain them, right? It's not that I've made this up. And those genuine teachers, they're not going to like emphasize, I had this moment of enlightenment, then I understood everything clear, and now how are we supposed to know whether they had it at that moment? Any cheater, anyone could come and say that. But what the real genuine Vedantins, the real sincere seekers, they're looking for someone who's a representative, who says, I'm like a mailman, right? My role is, it's not that I'm some special being. I'm just a person taking a message from one source and I'm handing it down. I received it from my guru, who received it from his guru, who received it from his. And it all is tied in to this original message that was shared through Vyasa's literature, shared through the Upanishads, shared through the Bhagavad Gita, etc. And so when we hear people that are really represented, those will be the richest sources of truth. And so the sage Krishnadas Kaviraj, brilliant sage, wrote an incredible text in this mood 500 or so years ago. When he's speaking about this exact point, he shares this verse. He reaches to a text called the Vishnu Purana, one of those authentic texts of Vyas. And he tells the story there of a yogi, a young yogi, a boy yogi named Dhruva. How many of you have heard of Dhruva before? Okay, his story is also told in Srimad Bhagavatam. He was just a boy, but he was incredibly determined in his yoga practice. He was doing it with a materialistic motive in the beginning, but he had a bhakti yogi guru, and that bhakti yogi guru gave him practices of bhakti yoga to do. And so he took them up with incredible determination, and he had a vision of Vishnu. And then he had the vision of Vishnu internally, and then it disappeared. And he's like, wow, what happened? And he opened his eyes, and Vishnu was standing before him. And he wanted to speak. But just like I was saying that Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he had these tears pouring from his eyes. These are symptoms of divine love. So this boy, his tears are pouring from his eyes, and his voice was so choked up in his devotional ecstasy, he couldn't speak. And so he was in this kind of like, it's hard to describe, but he had a heart just full that he needed to express, but he couldn't get the words out. And understanding this, Vishnu took his conch shell and placed it on his head, touched his head, and as soon as he touched his head, he could speak. And he began to speak these prayers, beautiful prayers, deeply meaningful prayers. It's from these prayers that we begin to understand how to put all these truths together. Right? These prayers are highlighted for us to understand. And this one verse, 500 years ago, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, great sage, took it and highlighted, framed it for us in his book called Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this is the verse. Dhruva is saying, O Lord Vishnu, you are the support of everything. The three attributes of Hladini, Sandini, and Samvid. And this is a little technical, but I'll just share this. Hladini, these are all called the internal energies of God, the spiritual energies. He has his material energies, but he has this internal spiritual energy. And Hladini is the energy of love, the existentially real, eternal feature of the nature of God that manifests as a separate energy that manifests and is personified by Srimati Radharani, right? So it's saying that there is an eternal energy of God that is love, beyond the temporary workings of the material mind. So it says, you are the support of everything. The three internal energies, including that love energy, exist in you as one spiritual energy. But the material modes, right? But the material energy, which causes happiness and misery and mixtures of the two, does not exist in you. You have no material qualities. So he's saying the form of Vishnu or the form of Krishna, it has its external and internal energies. The internal energies are the spiritual energies, those that are beyond our minds, but those are beyond the shiftings of the material energy. That divine love exists as an existential reality. So this speaker may have been denying that, but in doing so, he's denying the ancient teachings of Vyasadeva. And that should be clear, right? That should be clear. We should understand these things. He's saying love is the highest principle. Love is the energy of God. Love is something that is your nature because you are spiritual by nature and you are made of the energy of God. And through the practices of yoga, that energy can arise in you, and when it arises in you, it's like the sun arising, and all the darkness in your life and all the darkness in your consciousness is dissipated by that rising sun, right? It's just trying to make this clear. We shouldn't mistake the reflections of the truth as when we see falsity in this world, when we see illusion in this world, we should have a nuanced enough idea to understand that form isn't the problem, individuality isn't the problem, love isn't the problem. It's just the warped forms of them within the reflection. But they all have their reality, their spiritual reality. Don't we all kind of know? I mean, don't we all kind of know that love is the highest principle? Don't we see that? Don't we experience that? Why is it that we're all searching for that? Why is it that we look for it everywhere? Why are we so fascinated by it? Is it just because we're 100% in illusion? Or is there something real about it that we're searching for within an illusory realm? Right? And that's what the Bhakti yogis say, and that's what we find in these texts. So the point that I wanted to make was this example of Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He was a person that was practicing Bhakti Yoga. This was his life. Bhakti Yogena Sevate, right? Through practicing Bhakti Yoga, he got everything of Brahman realization because it's inside devotion. If you have love for God, you have that Brahman realization. You have that detachment from everything. You realize I'm not this body. You realize all these false identities that I've been identifying with over the course of many lifetimes are not the true me. You are free from the bewilderment of the material energy and the ups and downs that are going on. You have an even mind through all of this. As when you have love of God, you have that, right? You've let go of any material desire. It doesn't mean you don't have desire, but you've let go of all the material desire by grabbing onto the reality. So if you have love for God, you have Brahman realization. But if you have Brahman realization, if you have that peace, and if you have that, which is an amazing spiritual accomplishment, if you have that perfectly even mind, if you are not bewildered by the shiftings of this world, if you can stay even through all of it, and if you can realize within that these temporary identities and these temporary bodies are not me, I am spirit and I am beyond all that, that's a tremendous spiritual platform to have achieved. But it doesn't mean that you have love. You don't necessarily have love. If you have the divine love, you have Brahman realization. But if you have Brahman realization, you don't necessarily have divine love. And so what that's indicating is that divine love is the complete picture. It's the complete goal of yoga. It's where it all ultimately heads. It's where it all goes. So here was I'm sharing a practical example, a person that I knew, who we could see when he was in the most painful and difficult material circumstance. He was just like Krishna saying here in the Bhagavad Gita. He had a perfectly even mind. He was perfectly, not even beyond that, he was in bliss. Despite everything being as bad as it could be. But he had achieved that. How did he achieve it? He achieved it through Bhakti Yoga, right? When he developed that divine love and tears of love were pouring from his eyes, he was automatically, without even a separate effort, he had let go of everything of this world and had transcended it. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Yes, Amit.
Why would a Jnani is a person who has good knowledge?
Yes.
So he also has a knowledge that there is something called divine love and Bhagwan.
We just have to be careful right there. So you're saying a Jnani is someone with good knowledge,
Right.
and a Jnani also has knowledge of divine love.
Right.
But some of them do and some of them don't. Some of their knowledge stops before that. And that was my point in reading this statement that was where one Jnani was saying that love is only something that's going on in the material mind. It has no existential reality. It has no reality beyond the material energy. So not all Jnanis accept that.
But they know it, they don't accept it.
I'm
They
sorry?
know it as the literature is saying that, but they don't accept it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
They know that the literature says about divine love, but they don't accept it.
They see that literature that speaks about divine love as something meant for the popular people that's not as authentic or as deeply true. All these stories, Mahabharata, that's nice for the populace. That's nice for the people, but the Upanishads are meant for the renunciates. They're meant for the Jnanis. That's where you're going to find the real thing. And literally they say like this for women, for laborers, for less intelligent people. Then we have these stories like that. Krishna with the gopis in Vrindavan. These are stories for people that are not as intelligent, they're not as deep. No, not at all. And this is what Vyas clarifies in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He wants to clarify everything, and he picks examples of the people that were the greatest Jnanis, the examples of these people that were most beyond any touch of the modes of material nature. There's three groups, or three examples in Srimad Bhagavatam. One is Shukadeva Goswami. One is the four Kumars, and the other is the Navayogendras. These are all examples that are carefully curated for us, where we see, for instance, the four Kumars. Did I speak about this the day before yesterday? Maybe not here. The four Kumars are the sons of Brahma, who's the first being in the universe. And the first beings that he creates out of his mind are the four Kumars, four sages that were so determined to not get involved in any kind of materialistic activity that even though Brahma created them for the purpose of being progenitors, they chose to remain in the bodies of little boys. In other words, we're not going to get entangled by having kids in life, right? And the one way to just shut that down is they had the mystic ability that we will stay in the bodies of little boys. They're like they look like 4 little young boys, like 4-year-olds. But they were practically the oldest beings in the universe with incredible, jnana. Just like all the Shastras write about how they're on the very highest planets in the universe, and all the mystics and all the yogis are like hearing their instructions. They're way beyond any kind of material attachment. They're the deepest jnanis. And their attraction, they had an attraction to God's impersonal energy, right? But they had no experience of anything beyond that. And so Vyas in the Bhagavatam, he describes how they were wandering, and they had gone to the gates of Vaikuntha, the gates of the spiritual realm, and they were stopped by the guards, and the guards said, "You're not allowed to come in. Little boys, you should turn around and go away." They cursed the guards, and Vishnu himself comes and appears before them. And when they see the form of Vishnu, right? They were attracted to the formless feature of God, the Brahman. And for the first time, they connect with the form of God. And when they do, they see the form. They touch the form. They smell the form. It said, there's a verse in the Bhagavatam that said that when they smelled the aroma of the feet of the Lord, right? And the tulsi leaves that are there on the feet of the Lord, this love for the form of God, this love for Bhagavan arose in them. It awoke. It was awoken in them. And then they just start to speak prayers. This is such a beautiful painting. I wish I could share it with you right now. But there's a painting where Lord Vishnu is there, and all these 4 little boys are all around him and looking at him with such fascination that we had achieved this eternal peace, but now this is so much more. That was like a neutral stage, but this is like going way beyond that. The bliss in your form is way beyond the bliss of the non-personal energy. It's beyond. In the Bhagavatam, Vyasa is going to write is the bliss from the non-personal energy is like a drop. And the bliss from the form and the love that one feels for the form, for the person, is like an ocean in comparison. It's a whole different world. So they begin to share these prayers about how all the yoga, how all the dharma, how all the practices culminate in divine love. And it becomes very clear. The other most obvious example, very important example, is Shukadeva Goswami himself, who becomes the speaker of the Bhagavatam. He's a 16-year-old, naked, wandering sadhu. He's recognized by everyone. All the sages recognize him as the deepest, most advanced jnani, the most fully detached of everything of the material realm. And one example is given of that he's wandering away from home, and his father Vyas, who wrote all the Vedic literatures and who all the jnanis are dependent on for knowledge, his father is chasing him. And Sukadeva Goswami, again, naked, 16-year-old, beautiful sage, almost looks like he's a madman, you know? They say he had beautiful hair and it's hanging down over his face, and he's wandering. And he goes past like a pond, and there are young girls bathing in that pond, and they're naked. And he goes past them, and they just watch him go. And then the father, Vyas himself, comes after, and as soon as he comes, the girls all cover themselves up. And Vyas he's chasing, and somebody's like, hold it. Wait a second. My son walked past you, and you didn't do anything. And when I come past you, you all cover yourselves up. Why? And they said, we could just tell. You know, he doesn't look at us like girls. His consciousness is in a completely another level, you know. Women have a sensitivity to when men look at them with lust, isn't it? You can tell. I've heard. They have this intuition, right? Special power. And these girls, they had it, and they said, he's naked, we're naked, it doesn't mean anything to him. But Vyas, he's Vyasadeva, he's the compiler of all the Vedic literature. He's playing the role of a man in the world. Sukadeva Goswami he was just beyond it all. And then when he arrives at the crucial moment when the king, Maharaj Parikshit, is cursed to die in 7 days, all the sages are there, including Vyas himself, but they all recognize, no, you speak. Even though you're 16 years old, even though you have no clothes on, it doesn't matter, because you are beyond, you are beyond everything. And then a question comes, the sages ask, how is it that this, we all know about Shukadeva Goswami, we all know that he's completely otherworldly. How is it that he became attracted to hearing Krishna's pastimes? Boys and girls playing in the forest, isn't that form, love? Isn't love just something that goes on in the mind? Like our speaker here said, isn't it just some reaction to some material external stimulus that just passes through the mind and disappears like a dream? No. And then a very famous verse is spoken, it's called the Atmarama verse, where it says, even the Atmaramas. Atmarama means the Atma is the self, and Rama means pleasure. Even those whose only pleasure is found within, they're completely beyond searching for materialistic pleasure. They're not trying to find pleasure through any external source. They're fully beyond it. Even the Atmaramas find pleasure in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna because they are entirely spiritual. Right? They are something on an entirely different level. So tomorrow, we've run out of time for today. Tomorrow's our last one I'm going to be speaking, but I believe Kalakanta Prabhu will be speaking. We have a far more qualified speaker coming. So the classes will continue, and he'll give very, very worthy presentations, definitely worth coming for. But tomorrow we'll talk about Krishna, and we'll talk about this eternal reality of love. It's called Leela, divine play, and Rasa, the varieties of divine love, and how they are yoga, right? How they're not just stories. They're not for less intelligent people. They're actually for the Paramahamsas. They're for the most advanced yogis. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. As I mention every time, if you are interested in the previous classes, there's about 22 of them. You can simply see Gabrielle here, and she will connect you with that information. And meanwhile, like every day, there'll be wonderful kirtan here. I'll also be speaking in the evenings, tonight and tomorrow night, in the question and answer booth from 7 until 8:30. And otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow for one more class before I leave you all. And I'm heartbroken. Thank you all so much. Hari Om Tat Sat.